Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Shadow of the Erdtree. Today I'm talking about a list of story spoiler-free things you benefit from knowing, or doing sooner than later. These concepts should help you beat some of the harder enemy types, or know where to look for new weapons, materials, which new map fragments and more. So let's just begin. First up, I want to talk about these guys, the Giant Fire Wickerman. The official name of these giants is Furnace Golem. These golems will pop up in each major area. While the first you find and kill are pretty simple, they do get harder. They're very worth the effort though, because as you'll find, they drop the new crystal tier options for your wondrous physic. Some are going to be very useful. The physic is a key part of good build consideration, so getting all the new tiers unlocked is going to be an important task. Further, they drop materials for tougher craft, like the furnace pots. But to defeat them, you need to be aware that they have specific points that are vulnerable and areas that just aren't. Their face, for example, is a great target, or openings on the back, or if you're facing an easier one, the legs, though those do become armoured after a time. They use a variety of huge area attacks, fireballs at range, or massive slams and AoE that you can jump over to directly avoid, or use terrain to reach high enough to attack the faces with even a melee weapon. When you knock them down though, you'll be able to quickly hit them in the face for big damage, and that'll be key to killing the early ones. But did you know that if you bring a hefty fire pot or a hefty furnace pot and throw that straight into the basket above your head, you deal huge damage? It kind of overloads the fire, exploding inside where its brain I guess would be, and it deals about a fifth of the health bar. In this case, that's over 25k in one pot throw, which is a big deal. As you can see, you will need to find a way to get the pot into the basket above. Like I say, that might be when the golem is on all fours or using the cliff terrain. In this fight's case though, this is one of the harder ones with armoured legs, so the best option I have is to use 5 hefty fire pots and throw it into the basket from above on a cliff. With the 5th throw, it dies, and it seems to deal double damage on the last throw. So depending on your build, this can make a very hard fight much more possible if you don't have some kind of ranged attack to be damaging the face or something. So be aware of the pots in the basket. Speaking of giant enemies you absolutely want to kill, undead dragons. These enemies, also reoccurring around the Land of Shadow, often you'll find near a lake, just like the original dragons. These Ghost Flame versions though are like necromancers, using a mix of Ghost Flame which can freeze you, also they'll even summon skeletons to help them fight. While it can be an effort to kill these, they're always worth it because they drop max level upgrade materials and of course dragon hearts. As you might have thought, there is indeed a new Dragon Communion option, which does require the new Grand Altar of Dragon Communion in some cases in the southeast region of the map. So when you kill the new dragons, you potentially unlock new dragon organizations, and the resource to unlock them. My rule with these guys then is when I find one, I just kill it, since there's no special mechanic like the furnace golems, you just need to beat them. Now on the topic of killing specific enemies, I want you to be aware of these guys. The first one you're going to find is when you're crossing the bridge at the top of Bellerin. Right before you reach the stage front Grace, where you're going to encounter the major boss fight, you'll encounter this guy, a dude holding a pot over his head, of which you'll see a few of these around the Lands of Shadow. These ones are special though. It's a magical pot in this case, which allows him to cast these pesky spells at me from long range underneath me. When I find him and chase him down, you see how he reacts and tries to run away. So the point of this is, when you see these special pot guys, you must kill them. The reason is because they drop scattered tree fragments, and even the spirit ash blessings too, the resources that make you deal more damage and take less, and again the same for your summons. There's two kinds of these magical pot dudes at very least. One seems to drop the spirit ashes like this guy in Bellerat, but another that looks almost the same will drop the scattered tree fragments. So now you're aware of these guys, you need to make sure you kill them when you see them. Here's another tip that's more general but is important. You want to kill every enemy at least once if you can. That's an extreme concept and we can tone it down. What I really mean is the unique versions of enemies. For example, there's these new enemies in the DLC. They're like monstrous hippos. You'll find one in a location that is important as an actual boss, and yet they do exist around the Lands of Shadow in a more normal version, not necessarily a set boss fight. Take this one in the red flower area. When I killed it, even though it wasn't a real boss fight, it dropped a scattered tree fragment, something of immense value I'm glad I didn't ignore. So, if something looks a little out of place, unique or even suspicious, even though it's kind of a normal looking enemy, make sure you kill it. You can't really go wrong. There's a chance it'll drop something of value. Normal enemies will drop items, be it the weapon they're using, the shield, even the outfit it's wearing. Many of the new weapons in the DLC will be found that way by farming the new enemy types that are using new gear. So, just keep that in mind. On the topic of new gear you can find though, the new dungeon type called Ruined Forges. These locations are found around each zone and seem to always contain two consistent weapon types to get. One is a Smith script weapon, sometimes that'll be a new weapon to use or a new weapon type even. The first forge you find in the first zone has our first throwing dagger weapon type. The Smith script weapon is usually found midway through the dungeon, themed around the forge. But then the other weapon type you're going to find is a unique weapon rewarded at the end of the forge, when you interact with the altar at the end. Each of these weapons have been very unique, like a literal anvil on a stick, or this colossal sword that's just kind of barely shaped together metal. Not only that, there's going to be tons of upgrade materials throughout these forges. They've been the best source of mid to late game materials to get a new weapon upgraded for me. It makes sense. There needs to be tons of this stuff in the DLC, because, you know, we're accessing a lot of new weapons and gear that's going to need upgrading for the first time. So if that's a goal for you, I'd recommend these forges in particular. Alright, so speaking of weapons, here's a fast overview of where to find the new 8 weapon types. So, starting from the Scorched Ruins, which is just northeast of the Gravesite Plains, we're going to head northeast to this building here, where we find the Backhand Blade. Easy. Next, from the starting position of the Gravesite Plain, we're going to head southeast into this wooded forest. Somewhere in the center of that is a wandering naked NPC who will attack you on sight. He has the Beast Claws weapon type, so if you defeat him, you'll get your first ones. Next, for the Great Katana, we're going to head north from the Gravesite Plains all the way again to where I told you about that dragon in the lake. On the ground is a just kind of north NPC who will attack you on sight, where we find the Backhand Blade. Easy. Next, from the starting position of the Gravesite Plain, we're going to head southeast into this wooded forest. Somewhere in the center of that is a wandering naked NPC who will attack you on sight. He has the Beast Claws weapon type, so if you defeat him, you'll get your first ones. Next, for the Great Katana, we're going to head north from the Gravesite Plains all the way again to where I told you about that dragon in the lake. On the ground is a just kind of normal item drop that doesn't seem special. Is your first Great Katana, straight up. Next, from the 3-path cross, we're going to find the perfume bottle. So head across the bridge and bring yourself to again to where where I told you about that dragon in the lake. On the ground is just a kind of normal item drop, it doesn't seem special, is your first great katana, straight up. Next, from the 3-path cross, we're gonna find the perfume bottle. So head across the bridge and bring yourself to the castle front. Here on this hill is the perfume bottles, just waiting to be picked up. Also, we can get the light greatsword here. By crossing the bridge from the castle front towards the castle and working your way uphill, you're gonna double back into this large building and climb the tower at the back. At the top of this tower is Milady, our first light greatsword. Lastly, for a weapon type we can easily get in a starting area, from the castle front, head southeast, making your way to this cave entrance, the ruined forge lava intake. Follow this through all the way to the bottom, and you'll find this stone golem defending an item, which is indeed your first throwing dagger to use. But on top of that, we also have an easy access to a 7th weapon type. It's the awesome new hand-to-hand weapon. The first one you'll get is this, the Dryleaf Arts hand-to-hand weapon. To get it, you're going to need to come to the second region, the Skadu Altus. Specifically, you're going to find this grace. Here, you're going to find a monk message on the ground, which tells you to go find him to the east and challenge him, and you'll get this gesture. There is literally a cross just to the east here, the Morth Ruins, and that's where you're going to find the monk standing around. Meet him there, use the gesture you found to challenge him, and then you'll have to fight him. When you win, he'll be gone as you come back to the real world, but he'll leave you a message and the weapon and his hat, so it's not too hard to get, that's for sure. Finally, there's another weapon type that I'm not going to be able to directly show you. It's the first thrusting shield, the dueling shield, and it's found in the legacy dungeon, the Shadow Keep, which is a very spoilery zone, so that's all I'm going to say on this one for now. It's in there. Moving on, you might be wondering when you found Milady, the light greatsword, why it doesn't have this new Ash of War for the light greatswords. It's called Wing Stance, and it's literally meant to be their iconic way to fight, applied specifically to light greatswords, as it turns out. For some reason, this Ash just doesn't come with Milady. You're gonna have to go get it. Its location is very close to Milady though, so let me show you. From the castle front, or the castle of Enzis, you're gonna progress through this area and come to the final grace, which is the Castle Lord's Chamber. We're gonna need to exit the room here and go out to the balcony on the east side, and then drop off the balcony heading south. As we head down, you're gonna encounter this tower, and all you need to do is climb all the way up, and at the top, we have a chest containing, the Wing Stance of Ash of War, so it is that easy, thankfully. Okay, so here's a big topic I know I wish I had the answer to when I was playing a little bit early before launch, when the information did not exist. As you can see, we've gathered the 5 map fragments of the DLC. 5 are required to reveal the whole thing. And since this is just going to be a small section of a bigger video, I'm going to try keep this very basic and give you minimal spoilers with that. Expect a follow-up video later tonight with all the detail for those who want an exact path. But yeah, there's 5 zones. The first one is easy, it's the gravesite plain, and we're just going to get that straight away to get the first map tile. Next, we're going to go northeast to reveal this area, the Skadu Altus region. To get that, you're going to need to activate a Spirit Spring or go through Castle Enzis and defeat the boss. If you want to avoid defeating the boss though, it is very easy. From the castle front grace, we head down the road to the east, and here you're going to find a route leading down to some water. Progress past that water and follow the cliff edge on the north side, eventually finding a deactivated Spirit Spring. Just above that, in the same area, is a little rock over another Spirit Spring looking thing that when you destroy, it activates the original Spirit Spring. This allows you to climb all the way up to a place called the Fort of Reprimand, which you can just easily leave, and you're now in the Skadu Altus region. How about to the south in the Cerulean Coast? This one's a bit more hidden. Again, from the castle front grace, we're going to go down this path and head east and head down this kind of rocky pathway that leads down to this water. This time we're going to go past the Miranda Flower on the southwest side, heading for a cave that brings us to this grace, Elak River Cave. From here we follow the river down, which eventually leads us all the way to here, bringing us to another grace, which is called the Cerulean Coast, and that accesses this region. Next up, we have the southeast region, the Jagged Peak, which is actually behind a boss fight. Again, from the castle front grace. This time we're going to head southeast following the main road, leading up and up and up until you hit this grace, the Pillar Path Waypoint. You'll hear an NPC speaking and moaning here. You follow this valley down southwest until you come to this cave entrance called the Dragon's Pit. Simply progress through the Dragon's Pit and defeat the boss there. On the other side of the boss room, you're going to have this grace, the Dragon's Pit Terminus, which opens up that region of the map. Next up, we have the northwestern region, which is the ruins of Raoul. To get here, you'll first need to have come to the Skadu Altus region, as I've shown, and the nearest grace is the Morth Ruins. Head northeast to this little lake, and then head north through it. There's a cave entrance that you'll see, and pass through that to come out the other side. We'll pass through these kind of poison pools, and head under this natural bridge, hitting this grace, the ancient ruins base, which is the region we're looking for, with the fragment just to the southwest. Lastly, there's this kind of hidden region that's actually lower down. It's the abyssal woods, which is awesome, but I need to warn you not to go here until you're ready to progress the NPC storylines, which I'll explain in just a moment. To get here though, you actually need to come to a major location, the Shadow Keep. In short, you'll enter the main entrance and progress through the keep until you're at the top of this massive bridge. Cross to the other side, and on this side of the bridge here, there's a ladder leading down. Here's some proper footage to look at. At the bottom of the ladder on your left, there's a kind of waterfall hiding a sewer entrance. Pass through here and you'll come to this room with a painting. And on the right, there is an illusion wall you can break. At the end of this illusion wall path, there's kind of a suspicious looking coffin you can climb into. Do so, and it'll bring you here, the Castle Watering Hall. At which point, you head to the southeast side of the waterhole to another grace. Then we head south, following the water all the way down. There's another grace on the way. Following this path, you'll come across the Village of Flies, but instead of going there, continue to head down until you come to this lower section here, where we can find the Dark Light Catacombs. You'll need to complete the entire catacombs and pass to the other side, which will bring you here to the Forsaken Graveyard. At which point, you can pass to the southeast to go get the map fragment. And that's how to reveal the whole map. Finally, 2 quick tips that I want you to have in mind. First is a warning. Progressing the game to the Shadow Keep entrance, as I mentioned, will progress in-game time as it were. Basically, all the NPCs exist in phase 1 to begin with, and then when you approach the castle entrance of the Shadow Keep, something happens, an event occurs, and time progresses. The NPCs will now progress to phase 2, which will result in new events and the moving around. Maybe you want to avoid that until you're happy with what you've done with the NPCs, and if you didn't know that, you might accidentally go near the Shadow Keep entrance and progress it. So there's my warning. The other final tip is to do with that concept. I want you to know that you can happily explore around the early legacy dungeons or whatever legacy dungeon you want, but I think it's a good idea not to throw yourself against the major bosses there until you're ready. Often that will be tied to coming back later with high level Shadow Realm blessings or a better setup for that fight. You can go to every major zone, as I've just shown you, without fighting any major bosses. I think that's great design. It's a good idea not to burn out against a really hard boss that's even overtuned for you if your blessing level is low. You can go to them, do them when you want, come back later, and that's no issue. Knowing you can do that, I think is very freeing, and I recommend it. But there you have it, a nice list of useful concepts, details, and locations to consider. I hope that helped. If you guys have anything suitable I did not mention, then drop it in the comments. Until next time, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching.
Josh, constant Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.
All right, chores are done. Now can we do some dune bashing?
I don't know, Miko. Last time I spent a week picking sand out of my articulators. But there's a monster truck rally in town.
Optimus, I'm receiving a signal on a restricted band. It appears to be coming from a starship inside this solar system.
Checking out the higher tiers, you'll even get exclusive merchandise and other rewards, such as a private Discord channel where I will be at your beck and call. So if that sounds good, go check it out, and now let's get back to the next section of the video. Before we start, let me open up the map and you'll see the markers that I've placed. Near to marker 1 is a Site of Grace, so let's head there first. You will obviously see the Furnace Golem off in the distance. Ignore him for now, we will tackle him very shortly. For now, keep heading northeast, and once you've cleared the area, you can grab a new backhand blade. I know I said I wasn't going to cover minor items, but as we're here and we need to loop around anyway, keep heading northwest and you can get the Grave Glovewort 3 here. Now head west over to the other side of the plains. You can light a Site of Grace, grab a Scadutree fragment and introduce yourself to some new NPCs. Once you've done this, head south There'll be a load of grave birds and a load of them new blue spectral worm enemies. Feel free to ignore them though, they are not hostile. And also you'll find the entrance to a crypt. Activate the summoning pool sign if you wish, and down here you can go and fight the Black Jail Knight. As this is a jail, you cannot summon spirit ashes, but due to the fact that there's a summoning pool there, I believe you may be able to summon players to help you. He can be pretty damn tough. Luckily, the build that I advised you to use in the DLC, as you can see here, absolutely melted him, and you acquire not only his full armor set, but also his sword.
I wish I'd shot this photo at a wider angle, but I can change that with Adobe Photoshop. You don't need to reshoot, just open your image, select the crop tool and make sure that Generative Expand is selected in the drop down menu. Drag the corners of your image to your desired size and hit enter. Then you just select your favorite from the variations it gives you, and now you have more room for text and graphics and can make your content more eye-catching. I am so happy I discovered this feature because look how good that looks. It is such a handy tool for creating content. Sometimes you just need a little more room for creativity. Try it for yourself with Adobe Photoshop.
Once he's dead, we're done here. So now, before teleporting back to the 3-path cross Site of Grace, you can also tackle the Furnace Golem if you would like to. My advice to take him down is just have as much stance break damage as you possibly can, stay mounted on Torrent the whole fight, and just keep whacking away at his legs. Make sure you're using your double jumps to jump over his flame attacks, and just be very careful if he starts to swing around wildly. Just back off and wait for him to finish. Also, don't get grabbed because he will put you in his head, and that isn't very pleasant. After you've staggered him a few times, he will drop to the ground, and a crit will deal half of his health. Repeat this cycle one more time, and you will have him defeated. Once you defeat the Furnace Golem, you will be rewarded with a Furnace Visage and also the Deflecting Hardtear. Firstly, for the Furnace Visage, this is a new crafting material. Exactly as it states, it is exceedingly rare to find. They are limited. In fact, I believe during the duration of my 100% playthrough, I acquired 22 of these to be precise. And you definitely want to use them wisely and save at least a couple, because a few of them are actually required to access certain hidden optional areas. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, I'll cover that in a few episodes' time. Also, as I say, you'll get the Deflecting Hardtear, which is an absolute dream for people with a more defensive style. If you're not really comfortable with parrying, but you would like your defensive build to have a few more offensive options, then the Deflecting Hardtear is for you. This can be used both with your shield or your weapon, and all you need to do is block just before an attack hits. And as it states, this will boost not only your guard poise, but also your damage negation, meaning you take less damage and you are less likely to be staggered. And on top of this, if you do successfully execute a spontaneous guard through the use of the Deflecting Hardtear, your next guard counter will also have increased damage. So last minute blocks and guard counters are now a really viable build strategy for the DLC. This makes them super powerful and is something that hopefully a lot of people will be excited to learn. Teleport back to the 3-path cross Grace site and we'll grab the last item for this part of the video. Here you want to head northwest and keep hugging the cliff, and eventually you'll come upon the Ash of War Savage Lion's Claw. I was way off with my marker, so let me open the map and show you exactly where it is. It's just here. Now that you've done that, make sure you're prepared and we're going to head north into the abandoned Ailing village. As always, I'm going to start by placing down some rough markers in the general vicinity of where we're aiming to go.
For decades, travelers and explorers have passed through New York Harbor in search of fortune as the New World welcomed immigrants from around the world. Today, it is one of the busiest harbors in the United States and now hosts the final day of the Mubadala New York City.
to unite for the newbies and for the OGs.
It's just made to play.
Fast delivery, irresistible entertainment. Join Prime for $8.99 a month.
What's up guys? So because we're just as sick of these ridiculous build tier lists as you are, we decided to go through and rank the best builds in Elden Ring according to science.
Thy strength befits the crown. Long and hard didst thou fight,
So because we're just as sick of these ridiculous build tier lists as you are, we decided to go through and rank the best builds in Elden Ring according to science.
Thy strength befits the crown. Long and hard didst thou fight, warrior.
Coming in at number 4, we have the one-shot Barbarian. Now this is a quality build, so it focuses on strength and dexterity. The primary focus of the build was to one-shot everything in Elden Ring with the bow. So although melee weapons are covered, there's more emphasis on ranged weapons. And I could comfortably say this is the most power you'll see out of a physical ranged weapon or a quality build in Elden Ring. If you enjoyed this video, do us a solid and smash that like button. And if you want to see more of our videos, then feel free to subscribe. Let's take a look at the recommended stats. And for those of you on Patreon, don't forget there will be a written version of this guide over there as well. On a range build, we don't need too much vigor, so I went to the 40 soft cap. As always, feel free to put a little bit more if you feel like you need it. Strength is our main damage stat, so we're going to push it all the way up to the soft cap of 80. You're going to organically push it to 70, and then I'll go over the resources we use to get to 80 later in the guide. This is sort of a quality build because of the scaling on our main weapon, so you're initially going to push dex to 60, and then we're going to use some tools later to try to get it as close to that 80 soft cap as possible. As always, we're going to hit that PvE poise breakpoint of 51. And we're doing this so the enemy's light attacks do not interrupt our attack animation. And this could become a real factor with the slower animation of bows. This video is brought to you by Dungeon Hunter 6, the newest installment in the Dungeon Hunter series. With a history dating back to 2009, the highly anticipated addition to the franchise has arrived. Dungeon Hunter 6 boasts a dynamic hack-and-slash combat system allowing you to employ various builds and skills as you take on formidable bosses. The best part is that it's absolutely free to play. Download it now using the link in the description or scan the QR code on your screen if you're viewing on a PC. Dungeon Hunter 6 pushes the boundaries of 3D graphics performance, featuring mesmerizing skill animations designed for multicasting, guaranteeing the ultimate visual experience and seamless combat on mobile devices. In Dungeon Hunter 6, defeating a boss is just the beginning. The game features a unique system where you can not only loot, ride, and fly bosses, but also summon up to 3 of them to join your squad, follow you, and execute combo skills. Furthermore, in the late game, you can even shapeshift into them to wield the ultimate power. This innovative mechanic sets it apart in the genre, with over 100 distinct bosses to conquer and explore. Plus, monthly updates introduce new classes and units, ensuring endless fun in battle. Dungeon Hunter 6 elevates its 3D graphics performance to new heights, featuring breathtaking skill animations tailored for multicasting. This guarantees the ultimate visual experience and seamless combat on mobile devices. You can play with guildmates and battle in real-time guild wars, grind with a variety of skill tree options to test builds, and trade items via the auction system. Download the game now for free on both Android and iOS. You can use my link in the description or scan the QR code if you're viewing on PC. When using my link, you'll get a special starter pack worth $50, including 10 summoning scrolls, 1 SSR Lieutenant, the Demonic Wolf, and 1 accessory pack. Use your game account to enter the Launch Lucky Spin event for free to win great prizes like iPhone 15 Pro Max, PS5, Apple Watch, and more, starting October 15th. Check the description for details. Now when it comes to a bow one-shot build, we obviously want the strongest bow in the game AR-wise. In Elden Ring, that turns out to be the Golem Great Bow. While you can farm this from any bow-wielding golem, I found the most efficient method to be farming the golem right next to the Grand Lifted Dectus. It's not initially hostile, so it's pretty easy to get a stagger and then a critical. With a 10% drop rate as well, it shouldn't take too long to get this, and there's the added bonus of them dropping some other materials we'll need. Another bow we're going to pick up for this build is the Lion Great Bow. In order to get this bow, all you need to do is kill Radahn, and then you can purchase it at any point in the round. In this build, we're using it mostly in our offhand for the 20% damage bonus that it provides to Radahn's Spear's Great Arrows. Now for large enemies like dragons, when you're using through and through, you want to use the Golem's Great Arrow. The Golem's Great Arrow has a wind AoE that will knock over humanoids and provide AoE damage as well. It works really well with Rain of Arrows and through. These are farmed from golems as well. Now in small to medium sized bosses where you're going for headshots, you're going to want to use the Radahn's Spear Great Arrows. You can also buy these at the Round Table Hold as soon as you kill Radahn, and they're great to get an extra 20% damage on your headshots. Even when the Lion Great Bow is in your offhand, you still get the damage bonus for using these. Now if you're using your Great Bow for just general exploration, you don't want to burn through your top tier ammunition, just head to the Hermit Merchant Shack and buy Great Arrows. They sell an unlimited supply, they're much cheaper than Radahn Spears, and you can go buy more at any point. So I would recommend using these in non-boss situations. Now as a Barbarian with so much strength, I would recommend picking up the Giant Crusher. It's the highest AR weapon in the game, and it scales incredibly well with the build that we're already using. This weapon's just ground loot. All you need to do is defeat the ulcerated tree spirit that's guarding it, and you're good to go. Now let me justify these choices and provide you with some other options for weapons as well. For a one-shot bow build, the Golem Great Bow is just the obvious choice. It's by far the strongest great bow in the game, and this is in a large part due to its strength scaling. If you're looking for a lighter, faster, normal bow for general exploration, the pulley bow would be my go-to choice. Now the Giant Crusher is going to be the highest AR weapon, obviously, but if greatswords are more your style, then the quality Watchdog's greatsword would be your best bet. Now in keeping with the flavor of this build, I would go with the quality Zweihander. It's unique in that it's the strongest weapon in the game with a thrusting animation, making it the strongest weapon in the game that can perform a counterattack, and when doing counterattacks, it actually becomes the highest damage weapon in the game, surpassing the Giant Crusher. That's because counterattacks are exclusive to pierce weapons and provide a 30% damage bonus, which fits right in with this build, because arrows also do pierce damage, and we're using those counterattacks to kill some of the higher health bosses later in the game. Now if you want something smaller and lighter that's not a colossal weapon, the quality Banished Knight's greatsword is a great option, but personally for the same reasons that I chose the Zweihander, I would go with the quality Claymore, and trade a tiny bit of AR for the superior moveset and that thrusting animation. Now as always, you can use any weapon in the game that makes it more fun for you. Really any strength, dex, or quality scaling weapons are going to perform really well in this build. For your melee weapons, use whatever Asher Warren skill you want, but for bows, there's some that I specifically recommend. The first of which, and the most important, is going to be Through and Through. Now this already comes on the Golem Great Bow, so you don't need to go get this unless you want to use it on a different Great Bow. In which case, it's very easy to get. It's up in Mount Gelmir, and all you need to do is kill an invisible scarab. And the scarab's located just before heading down into the entrance of Volcano Manor. And the Through and Through skill is how we're getting these massive damage numbers on these dragons. If you watch closely in slow motion, you'll notice that the arrow hits multiple times. And I need more testing, but I believe it's exclusive to the Golem Great Arrows. Something to do with the Golem Great Arrow's wind AoE effect hitting multiple hitboxes as it passes through. Another Ash of War that I highly recommend is Rain of Arrows. Now to get this, first you need to go and grab the painting in the town of Cilia. Then you're going to use the Spirit Spring in Eastern Caelid by the Erd Tree, and double jump exactly like I do in the video shown. And you can save yourself the hassle of having to jump down all the tree roots this way, since you don't take fall damage when using a Spirit Spring. This pairs extremely well with the AoE from Golem Great Arrows, and I'll show an example of that in the buff section. So with armor, as usual, there's two major considerations. We have the defense and poise side of things, and then the fashion souls side. This setup ticks all the boxes. So starting things off with the legs, we went with the Knights Cavalry Greaves. They give us 15 poise and they have a great poise to weight ratio. For gloves, we went with the Knights Cavalry Gauntlets. They give us another 5 poise and they match the Knights Cavalry Greaves. And then a big surprise on the chest armor, we went with the Knights Cavalry Armor, which give us 25 poise. This set has really good poise to weight ratio and it looks fantastic. I love the all black aesthetic and the balance between the cloth and metal. You can pick this set up on the southern part of the consecrated snowfield. You're going to see a large caravan like you see in many other parts of the game. The key difference being that this caravan is going to be guarded on both the left and the right side by 2 Knights Cavalry enemies. And in order to get the Knights Cavalry set, all you need to do is kill these 2 Knights Cavalry enemies. And with the one-shot bow build, it's pretty easy because you can do this without aggroing both of them at the same time. Now after killing the second enemy, you'll be rewarded with the Knights Cavalry set, and then you're good to go. If you choose, you can actually use the Knights Cavalry helm in this build as well. That's completely up to you. You should still be under your weight for medium roll, and it pushes you to 53 poise. For purely aesthetic purposes, I went with the black knife hood. It weighs a little bit less, but with the 6 poise it provides, I was still able to hit the 51 poise breakpoint. If you plan on rocking the black knife hood as well, all you need to do is go to the back side of Ordina, and underneath the staircase in the back of the town that leads you up to the portal to the Haligtree, you just hop down and look underneath that staircase, and you'll find the entire black knife set. Now if you don't care much about fashion, and your primary goal is just min-maxing defense and poise, here's a list of some of the best armor combinations to keep under medium roll with the Golem Great Bow. Realistically, all you need to do is try to hit the 51 poise breakpoint for PvE and wear whatever armor you want. Now talismans play a huge role in adding damage to your build. Now the talisman that carries the most weight for this build might actually surprise you. The Shard of Alexander raises damage from skills by 15%. This will apply to both Through and Through and Rain of Arrows. To get the Shard of Alexander, all you need to do is finish Alexander's questline, meet him in Crumbling Farm Azula, and clutch a 1v1. Now for any bow build in the game, you're always going to want to use the Arrow Sting Talisman. This is just a flat 10% increase in damage to all arrows and bolts. You can grab this really early on too. All you need to do is go over to Caelid and climb the tower right before reaching the bridge to Redmane Castle. Now counterattacks provide 30% more damage, and that actually stacks with the Spear Talisman, which provides a 15% increase to counterattack damage. You can also pick this up very early inside of a chest in the Lakeside Crystal Cave. The way the math works, you actually end up with 49.5% more damage on counterattacks with this. Since we're a ranged character, and especially if you're using Spirit Ashes, you shouldn't really be getting hit much. So we can really take advantage of the Ritual Sword Talisman, which increases damage by 10% while you're at full health. You can pick this up in the Lux Ruins after a very easy boss fight. Now, if you find during exploration you're killing a lot of things from a range, you may want to pick up the Arrow's Reach Talisman, which increases the range of projectiles by 65%, and you can pick this up just moments after starting the game. It's in Limgrave in a tower just above Gatefront. There might be cases it's worth using to increase your damage range. Now, most people don't want to do a long-winded one-shot buff routine, so let me show you how you can absolutely dominate in under 5 seconds with only 3 buffs. The first of which is the Rallying Standard. This is the skill on the Commander Standard, and it increases all damage by 20% for 30 seconds. And to get this weapon, all you need to do is kill Commander O'Neill in the swamp over in Caelid. The Blood Boil Aromatic increases all of your physical damage by 30% for 60 seconds. This is a craftable item that you gain access to as soon as you pick up the Perfumer's Cookbook 2 in the Shaded Castle. And if you're unfamiliar, that's on the northern side of Altus Plateau right before crossing over to Mount Gelmir. Now, the first of our 2 flask tiers, we're using the Strength Knot Crystal tier. This raises our strength by 10 for 3 minutes. It's a great tool to buff the strength scaling weapons like the Golem's Great Bow early and hit that 80 soft cap. You can pick it up extremely early as ground loot just outside of Stormvale. Our second tier is going to be the Dexterity Knot Crystal tier, and this is accessible early as well. It's ground loot as soon as you get into Liurnia, and since we're basically a quality build, we definitely want to get dex as high as possible. Eventually beyond level 150, you'll try to hit the 80 soft cap as well. Now, to showcase the strength of this simple buff routine, we use our flask, our Blood Boil, and then our standard. And this should drive home the point that you can really ramp your damage up to insane amounts with just a couple seconds of buffing. I also set up the fight this way so that I could demonstrate the power of the Rain of Arrows combination with the Golem Great Arrow that I was talking about. It's not very hard to see some pretty crazy damage numbers with that combination. The Rain of Arrows just pairs really well with kind of that ground AoE air explosion from the Golem Great Arrow. And it's a great alternative to the Through and Through skill if you're looking to change it up. Just throw Rain of Arrows on a Great Bow, since you can't change the skill on the Golem Great Bow. Alternatively, you could also use the Lion's Great Bow since it already has that skill on it as well. As usual, you can use whatever consumables you want with this build. The one I would recommend strongly, which should come as no surprise if you just watch the buff routine example, would be Sleep Pots. Situationally, these can be incredibly strong in making a hard boss fight into a very easy boss fight. It also indirectly increases your damage output by 20%. You can craft these after getting the Fever's Cookbook 1, which is available very early on in Limgrave. Now, if you're still here, that means you're enjoying the video, and if you haven't smashed the like button yet, you should do so now. And if you're looking for a written checklist version guide of this build, or you want a guide on how to tumble buff Royal Knight Resolve onto the Golem Great Bow, all of that stuff is over on our Patreon. So whether you're just looking to support the channel a little bit, or you're looking for access to those custom guides, the link for the Patreon will be at the end of this video on a clickable element or in the description and pinned comment below. Also, be sure to leave your comments in the comment section below and let us know what build you want to see as a one-shot build next, or other ideas for guides or builds that you'd like to see. Now, for the example one-shot buff routine, we're going to use Godfrey. As always, you're going to start off with your flask, and then we're going to start building up our Frenzy to proc Madness for the Black Dumpling, and then just before we proc Madness, we're going to use the Blood Boil Aromatic. This is because it lasts 60 seconds, just like the Black Dumpling buff. Next, we're going to restore our FP, and then we're going to switch to the Mushroom Crown to get ready for the poison procs. Then we're going to use the Rallying Standard and equip our Golem Great Bow. We're going to use Fetid Pots to poison ourselves in order to proc the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation and the Mushroom Crown. Then we're going to switch to the White Mask and use Seppuku to proc the White Mask and Lord of Blood's Exaltation, and then quickly switch to the Red Feather Branch Sword and the Arrow Sting Talisman. All that's left is to tumble buff Royal Knight's Resolve onto the Golem Great Bow, switch our offhand to the Lion Great Bow, line up a headshot, time the counterattack, and send it.
Amazon, home to unmissable offers, astonishing deals, and low prices. Find thousands of great daily deals on Amazon.
Good evening.
Brave, tarnished, thy strength, insane crown.
Coming in at number 3, we have the Carrion Knight one-shot mage. Now with this build, I actually one-shot the Fire Giant at level 1. But just to clarify, the one shot used in these builds is just to demonstrate the power, so for general gameplay just refer to the buff section. The one shot buff tutorial at the end is more for advanced users that are trying to replicate these one shots. Also, by no means are you bottlenecked into using the spells and skills that I use in this build. Feel free to supplement with any spells or skills that you want to use on your mage. So let's quickly go over the important stats. So with the really high damage on this build, 50 vigor should be more than enough. If you really need more, you can push to the 60 soft cap, but 50 should be more than enough for this build for PvE. With the cadence of this build being slower but much harder hitting, 19 mine should be more than enough. Now our main damage stat is going to be intelligence, and we're going to scale this to 80 for several reasons. The first of which is because this is the final soft cap for scaling magic damage on your weapons. And the second is because this is the major soft cap for intelligence in regards to sorcery scaling on the staff we're going to be using. This isn't a very endurance hungry build. We need enough endurance to get enough poise to hit the 51 poise breakpoint, because with 51 poise in PvE, most regular attacks will not interrupt your attack. And as Margaret demonstrated, this is important for this build. Strength and dexterity are going to vary depending on the weapon that you choose. More on that in the weapons section of the guide. Long story short, just enough to use the weapon that you choose. Speaking of which, if there's a weapon you think that might be tailored to this build even better, leave it in the comments below. The only other stat we need to cover is Faith, which we're going to organically take to 20, and then push to 35 with items. When it comes to weapons, this build is really unique in terms of the flexibility that it offers. This is because most of our damage comes from either skills or spells. Now the main weapon that I recommend for this build is the Misericord. This is an extremely lightweight dagger found in the Stormvale Castle. You will need a stone sword key to access it, but I think this is the perfect weapon to put Carrion Grandeur on, and I'll explain why. When dealing damage to an enemy in a vulnerable state, such as a stance broken enemy or a backstab, that damage is enhanced via the critical modifier, and the Misericord has the highest critical modifier of any weapon in the game. As a bonus, it's also one of the lightest weapons in the game, not affecting your equip load much. With Carrion Grandeur's stance breaking ability, this is just the perfect weapon to use. Now when casting the sorceries in this build, you're going to want to use Lusat's Glintstone Staff. You can pick this up in a chest in Celia, which is located over in Caelid. Now this chest is gatekept behind the Nox Duo boss fight. Depending on your experience level, this boss fight should be trivial with Carrion Grandeur. Now at 80 intelligence, Lusat's Glintstone Staff does give us the highest damage. That does come with a trade-off of a 50% increase in spell FP cost. But with slower, heavy-hitting spells like we're using in this build, that doesn't really matter. If you find it annoying, feel free to use the Carrion Regal Scepter. It's another great alternative. Now, if you're looking to add a melee weapon to the build, I recommend the Guardian Sword Spear. You can easily farm this near the Minor Erdtree in Caelid. There's a good amount of Erdtree Guardians, and they're really easy to kill. I chose this weapon over the more traditional Claimant's Harpoon, and I'll explain why. For quality of life, you're mostly going to be running the magic affinity on your weapon, especially with the buff to magic scaling. And looking at the numbers, it's just very clear why we would choose the Guardian Sword Spear over the Claimant's Harpoon. Now, if we were to use Scholar's Armament, the Claimant's Harpoon does shine. This is only if you were to take intelligence down to the 50 breakpoint and invest those 30 points into strength. The Claimant's Harpoon with no affinity does have 596 AR, so we could apply Scholar's Armament on top of that 596. I want you to note though that of that 596, 224 of that is magic damage. That'll be important later. Now if we do the exact same thing and only hit the 50 breakpoint for intelligence, and reinvest those points into dexterity to optimize the build for melee for the Guardian Sword Spear, we see the Keen Guardian Sword Spear has an AR of 646, and that's 50 more damage than the Claimant's Harpoon. This is before adding Scholar's Armament, which would be an equal buff to both of around 300 additional magic damage. And another very noteworthy thing here is that all of the 646 damage on the Guardian Sword Spear is physical damage, whereas around a third of the Claimant's Harpoon damage is still magic damage. So for the enemies in the game that are resistant to magic that you want to use a different damage type, the Guardian Sword Spear pulls even further ahead. Let's dive into the real sources of the crazy damage in this build. We're taking advantage of the highest damage skill in the game and some of the highest damage spells in the game as well. The focal point of this build is going to be Carrion Grandeur. You can pick this skill up as Ground Loot in the Carrion Manor. This is the highest damage skill in all of Elden Ring. Damage that Carrion Grandeur does scales directly off of the weapon upgrade level and your intelligence level. The Cannon of Haima is incredibly useful. It's a very strong ranged spell with a huge AoE explosion. You can pick this spell up in the Converted Fringe Tower after doing Thop's questline. This will be your go-to spell for times that you want to keep a little bit of range from enemies. Now if you're unfamiliar with the questline, all you have to do is go and talk to Thops the first time and donate the 10 runes. Then head over to the academy and grab the academy glintstone key. Then just drop down from the chandelier and head outside and grab the Twin Sage glintstone crown. You can use any glintstone crown. This one's just very convenient because it's right next to where we're already at to grab the glintstone key. return to Thops and give him that glintstone key and he will reward you with the erudition gesture. Then all you need to do to solve the puzzle is wear a glintstone crown and use the erudition gesture at the seal in the converted fringe tower. This will open the seal and give you access to the chest upstairs. Now in the same exact chest at the top of the converted fringe tower, you will also be rewarded with the Gavel of Haima. This is another incredibly powerful sorcery, and it will smash most humanoids down to the ground, as well as creating a large damaging AoE effect. It's fun to use and situationally very strong. If you're looking to add a little bit more damage and poise damage to the build, there's an Everjail west of the Academy that rewards the Great Blade Phalanx, and this will summon 3 large glint blades above you. Casting these before a fight is a great way to add some extra damage and poise damage. With armor we need to consider poise, fashion, and defense. I think this setup is the pinnacle of the intersection of the 3. For legs we're going to go with Blythe's Greaves. These give us 17 poise, really good defense, and a solid poise and defense to weight ratio. For the exact same reasons we're going with Blythe's Gauntlets. These tack on an additional 6 poise, bringing our total to 23 so far. Then for the chest, Blythe's armor actually gives us 28 poise, allowing us to hit that 51 soft cap without even having a helmet on. That means we hit the poise breakpoint, you can wear whatever helm you want. Now Blythe's armor can be found at Ronnie's Rise at the end of her quest line. Now unfortunately, to get this armor you have to take it from Blythe, so when he becomes aggressive at the end of Ronnie's quest line, all you need to do is kill him and he will drop the entire set. So not only is this one of the best looking sets in the game, but it also has great defense to weight ratio and poise to weight ratio. Now for those of you that aren't familiar with Ronnie's quest line or how to finish it, since it's a prerequisite for the armor, let me give you a really quick rundown on how you complete it. The very first task that Ronnie's going to give you after getting to Ronnie's Rise is going to be to go and get the Fingerslayer blade. All you have to do is bring this back and give this to her, head down to the Ainsel Rivermain and defeat the Baleful Shadow, then go to the Academy and get the Dark Moon Ring. Then after killing Estelle and talking to Ronnie, Blythe should be hostile at Ronnie's Rise. Now as for helms, I opted to go for the Black Knife Hood. Since we're already at 51 poise, this was purely an aesthetic decision. You can substitute anything here if you don't like the look. Now the Black Knife Hood and the entire Black Knife set actually are very easy to obtain. This entire set is just ground loot underneath a staircase in the back of Ordina. So as soon as you have access to the Consecrated Snowfield, feel free to go over there and grab it. And just remember, you can substitute this for whatever helmet you really want. Speaking of which, if you are using the Guardian Sword Spear and you don't care at all about fashion, here's a couple best in slot combinations from an armor calculator to give you options in terms of pure performance. And if you're not going to be using the Guardian Sword Spear so you have some extra weight to play with, here's a similar list for you to choose from in that scenario. Also, feel free to wear whatever armor you think looks good. Just for PvE purposes, try to hit the 51 breakpoint if you can for poise. So now let's cover talismans. We'll cover the 4 main talismans as well as 3 others that I recommend supplementing into the build. The first and most obvious talisman is going to be the Shard of Alexander. This will increase the damage of all skills by 15%. You can obtain this from Alexander at the end of his quest line, and this really only requires you to talk to him at Radon and in the lava at Mount Gomer. Next up is the Godfrey Icon. This can be found in an Everjail just off to the side of the Grand Lift of Dectus as soon as you go up, and this raises both charged spell and skill damage by 15%. All you need to do is grab a Stone Sword key, unlock the Everjail, and then go inside and defeat Godfroy, and he will drop the Godfrey's Icon. This can be used to boost the damage of both Carrion Grandeur and the Cannon of Haima. This brings us to the Greatjar's Arsenal. This is found just outside of the Caelid Colosseum, and it raises our maximum equip load by 19. If you're not using the Guardian Sword Spear, you can omit this, but if you are, this is a great way to help you hit that poise breakpoint without much endurance. If you're not familiar with reaching this area, you just need a Stone Sword key to unlock the elevator from the Siofra Riverwell. After making your way to the end of the path, you will need to summon and defeat all 3 of the hostile NPCs who have summon signs on the ground. I recommend using your buffs and putting down Terra Magica before the fight. If you have trouble, just wait until you level up a little bit and then come back later. Moving on, we have the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. This can be found in a chest over in Haligtree, and this reduces all physical damage taken by 20%. This is an absolutely massive damage reduction, and if you're a new player, I highly recommend it. But if you don't need the defense, I've got some great alternatives. The first of these would be the Magic Scorpion Charm that you get from Saluvius' Rise. This will raise all of your magic damage by 12%, and this would be my first choice for replacement for any of the 4 talismans I've already listed. Now in order to obtain this, you need to do Saluvis' quest, which is pretty simple. He's going to ask you to give a potion to Nefeli. You can do what I did and hand it over to Gideon instead. Then you can go back and tell him that you gave the potion to Nefeli, buy out all of his spells, and then explore the hidden ruins nearby. At this point, he'll give you a puppet. You want to choose the Jarrite puppet. This is the more expensive of the 2 puppets. Now you only need 2 Starlight Shards, and you can go back and buy the other puppet. I also recommend just grabbing the Amber Starlight before heading back. Buy the Finger Maiden puppet and give him the Amber Starlight, and at this point he'll give you the Magic Scorpion charm and you can feel free to betray him and go back to Ronnie. If you find yourself using more of the spells in this build, you can feel free to grab the Graven Mask Talisman. This is in a tower on the east side of the Consecrated Snowfield and it raises all sorcery damage by 8%. In order to unlock this tower, you need to solve the puzzle. So first go back to the academy and talk to the merchant there and buy the Fanged Imp Ashes. Then when you get back to the tower, you need to summon the Fanged Imps. And then there's an Imp enemy on the left side of the tower. Your Fanged Imps have to deal the killing blow to that Imp enemy in order to unlock the tower, so just hit it a few times to make it weak to help them out. The final talisman that I recommend is also back in Haligtree. It's the Marika's Sword Seal. This is a great way to fill the gap on the 5 faith that we need prior to having Godric's Great Rune. It raises Mind, Intelligence, Faith, and Arcane by 5 each. It can be looted from a chest, but you will need a stone sword.
Play set for life.
The full one-shot buff routine tutorial will be at the end of the video, but these are buffs I think that are worth using. Terra Magica can be found in the Academy Crystal Cave underneath the Academy. This is going to raise all magic damage by 35% while standing in the blue glyph on the ground. In order to access this, you're going to need to kill the Crystallian Duo boss in there and make your way up the elevator to the chest at the top. With only those requirements, that means you can get this spell very early in the game. The Hal of Shabiri can be found in the Frenzy Flame Tower, and this is an incantation that increases all damage by 25%. This can be acquired really early as well with no boss requirement. All you need to do is reach the chest on the 2nd level of the tower. This buff is definitely worth the small investment in faith. Speaking of faith buffs, I would definitely go up early and grab Golden Vow near Mount Gelmir. This incantation is just ground loot in a small hut, but this buff will increase all damage by 15%, and it lasts for a whopping 80 seconds. But as always, you can feel free to substitute the Commander Standard. Now as for our flask, the first crack tier we're going to talk about is the Magic Shrouding crack tier. This raises all your magic damage by 20%, and you can easily obtain this by simply defeating an Erdtree avatar. For this build, I would say this is the strongest crystal tier and the one I most recommend that you use. Now early on, before hitting the 80 soft cap, you may want to use the Intelligence Knot crystal tier. This will raise your intelligence stat by 10 for 3 minutes. Depending on how early or whether or not you invest in Faith at all, this may be a great option early to replace the next tier we're going to talk about. So the Faith Knot tier can be found down in the Weeping Peninsula, and similar to the Intelligence Knot tier, it provides an additional 10 Faith for 3 minutes. I found this to be the best way to reach the 35 Faith needed to use all of the incantation buffs without having to sacrifice intelligence. Now as for consumables, there's only one that really stands out above all the rest and complements this build really well, via both adding damage and a debuff simultaneously from range. This is a craftable item
Little
called
fucker.
and you can find
2 days.
in the carry
Your mother's crying.
The freezing pot causes 380 frost buildup, and the frostbite debuff will increase all damage done to an enemy by 20%. So debuffing a boss with this is the equivalent of having a second Magic Shrouding crack tier. It's a very significant spike in damage, and if you're not trying a one-shot challenge, I highly recommend that you're using these on bosses. This was the most requested build on the channel ever. I think it's mostly in response to one-shotting the Fire Giant with it at level 1 during our level 1 one-shot challenge run. If you haven't seen that video, you should definitely go check it out. And I wanted to mention for the patrons, there will be a written playthrough style version of this guide, as well as a build checklist over on Patreon. And if you're interested but not over there yet, there will be a big floating clickable link at the end of the video. I will also have an in-depth tutorial on how to tumble buff over there. But at this point I'm getting tired of hearing myself talk, so I'm sure you are too. Let's jump into the Fire Giant one-shot tutorial. So start off with your flask for the extra 10 faith in the Magic Shrouding crack tier. Then cast Golden Bow, and you're going to start building up your madness with Hal of Shabiri. This part is not for the Hal of Shabiri buff, this is to build up some madness.
Welcome to Specsaver's Guide to the Perfect Smooch. It's pretty simple really. When you and your beau finally decide to lock lips, you don't want anything getting in the way, especially your specs. Oh, I've been there. Now, we love glasses, but some things are better with contact lenses.
Elden Ring is